Hello, today I'm going to be talking to you about participial adjectives. Are you interesting or are you interested in participial adjectives? Hopefully you are interested. Now this is something that causes problems for a lot of people studying English. Hopefully today we will help to solve some of those problems. There's actually quite a bit that you can say, that I can say, about participial adjectives. But today I'm only going to talk about the first type of participial adjectives, which is talking about verbs of feeling, state, and emotion. Now you might think, wait, are you talking about verbs or adjectives? Well, that's a good question. A participle is a form of the verb. Break, broke, broken. Broken is a past participle of the verb break. So when you learn forms of a verb, you learn these different participles. Now, the present participle of a verb has the ing ending. Interesting, frustrating. Interest is a verb. Frustrate is a verb. So the ing form is a form of the verb. However, we use that form, we take that form, and we can use it also as an adjective. So we're just taking the form from the verb and we're changing it to be an adjective. And this is what's called a participial adjective. Now, let me say, we're talking about these verbs of feeling and state and emotion. Most of these verbs in English are more commonly used in their adjective form than as an active verb. I mean, it's possible to use the active verb to say that worries me. You can do that, sure. But it is very common and more common for some of these verbs to use the adjective form. I am worried. I am tired. It's not common to say that tires me. So these participial adjectives are very important to be able to express these ideas in English. Some languages use these feeling words as verbs. But in English, it is more common to use them as adjectives. So let's look at these two different participles, the present participle and the past participle. These are the two participles of a verb, and these are what we can use as an adjective. Now, the present participle is the ing form. The past participle is that third form, like broken. But when we're talking about verbs of feeling, it's almost always going to be just a regular ed. They're usually regular verbs. I've been teaching this for a long time, and I've almost always taught it that the present participle is the active meaning. It describes the doer of the action. But I've learned that it's a little hard for a lot of students, and for me too, to think about some of these feelings as actions or doers. So I think actually it works better to talk about it as the source. The ing form describes the source of the feeling. If you don't know that word, it's a good one to look up. It's the origin. It's the cause. It's where something comes from. The source. So we're going to use the ing form to describe the source of something. The past participle, that's the passive meaning. It's the receiver of the verb. And I think it's good for this one to talk about it as the affected person, affected, receiving the feeling. Now, why do I say person? Because when you're talking about feelings, emotions, it's a person who is affected. Maybe an animal. Sometimes you might talk about an animal's feelings. But you can't say the tired computer unless you're joking. So almost always this will be talking about the person who is affected, the person who feels something. And that's really the most important thing to learn in this video, because that's the biggest problem I see in students. If people say, I am interesting, and that's not what they want to say. They want to say, I am interested, because they're talking about themselves as being the affected, the feeling person. There are basically two positions that you will find adjectives in English. You have adjectives that come before nouns, right? The white board. Or you have the noun plus a linking verb plus an adjective. The board is white. Same thing for participial adjectives. We can use it before the noun, a confusing assignment. The assignment is the source. So we use the ing, confusing. A confused student. The student is the affected person. So we need to use the past participle, confused. With the noun plus linking verb plus adjective. Linking verbs. This is a special category of verbs in English that connect nouns and their complement, but something like an adjective. So these are verbs like be, am, are, is, seem, appear, look, not look with your eyes, but you look happy, that meaning. Act, feel, sound. These can all be used with participial adjectives after them. The news was shocking. Shocking describes the news. The news is the source. So we need to use the ing. That sounds terrifying. Your friend tells you, yesterday I was driving down the road and another car came directly at me and turned at the last minute. You say, oh my goodness, that sounds terrifying. The experience, that is the source of the terror. So we need to use the ing. He looked shocked. He is not the source of the shock. He is the affected person. So we use the past participle. You seem surprised. You are not the source. You are the affected person. So you use the past participle. And I'm using different linking verbs for you here. Was, sounds, looked, seem. Give you an idea of that. These are the main ideas to know for participial adjectives of feeling. Let's talk about some of the smaller points to know. If you want to use a comparative, you don't use ER, you use more. And that's because usually with adjectives that are two or more syllables, like interesting, you need to use more, not ER. With superlative, you use most. You don't use EST. Same reason. It's two or more syllables. That's the most convincing argument. The argument is the source of the convincing. So you need to use the ing. You're more impressed than I am. More is the comparative. This is describing you, and you are the affected person. So we use the past participle. Not all feeling verbs use both participial forms as adjectives. That would be really nice, but you know there's always exceptions in English. So you can say impressed. That's the past participle. She was impressed. But you don't say impressing. You don't say the lecture was impressing. You say the lecture was impressive. That's the active form. Scared is the receiving affected person form. The child was scared. But you don't say the dog was scaring. That's not the adjective. The adjective is scary. She was delighted, but not the party was delighting. No, the party was delightful. How do you learn these? You have to just memorize them. So some of them use these adjectives, sometimes IVE, sometimes Y, sometimes FUL. You notice that the ED form is almost always the same. It's the ING form is sometimes actually different, a different form. So just pay attention, and when you see that, notice it, okay? The most common position of these two positions is this one. So when you're using participial adjectives, it is more common to use this position than to use this position. The man was touched by her words. The man was touched by her words. Touched means like something really affects you a lot. Like a movie that makes you, oh, it's beautiful. You're touched, right? So maybe she told him that she loves him, and he's, oh, touched by her words. That's great, but we do not use this participial adjective before the noun. The touched man went out. We don't do that. Why? Just because it's more common to use this form. Some of the participial adjectives really never come in this form. It's less common, and for some, you don't use it. Now, let's talk for a minute about prepositions. Prepositions are always tricky. The best thing to talk about first is the present participle, describing the source. So, the source of the embarrassment. This is embarrassing. If you want to talk about the person who is affected also, then you would use for or to. With embarrassing, it's for. With amazing, it's to. Again, you just have to learn these. I'm sorry, there's no easy solution. It's learning which ones go together. This is where reading and listening as much as possible in English makes a big difference. So this is embarrassing for me. It's amazing to me that you are here. Okay? With a past participle, because a past participle is a passive idea, the most common preposition is by. If you've studied passive, you know that you use by before an agent. So that's the most common. She was terrified by the shark. But not all of them use by. If you use interested, you don't say you're interested by something. You say that you're interested in something. When you are disgusted or upset at a person. If you are pleased or satisfied with something. And all of these things that we're talking about after it are the cause, the source. So this is when you want to be able to talk about both the cause and the affected person. That's when you need to use these prepositions, right? From, you can be exhausted from a long day's work. Tired of something. You can find lists of these online that show the prepositions that you need to use with different participial adjectives. Finally, some students ask me if something is a participial adjective or a progressive verb. For example, the dog was frightening the child. Is this an example of a noun plus a linking verb plus a participial adjective? Or is this a past progressive verb? Now, usually I will answer and say it doesn't really matter if you can use it correctly and if you can understand it correctly. But maybe you have a grammar teacher who expects you to be able to tell if it's a verb or an adjective. Okay, let me give you a little help with this then. So first, these are the two questions you can ask to test it. You can ask the question, does the participle have an object? So does the participle have an object? Yes, it does. The child is the object. So if the answer is yes, then it's a progressive verb. The verb can have an object. Most verbs of feeling are transitive verbs, which means it has a direct object. So you see the direct object here, you know that this is a verb, this is a past progressive. But what if you take out the child and just say, the dog was frightening, period. Now, frightening is an adjective describing dog. So now it is a participial adjective. We just changed the grammar function of this word. There are some verbs that can be transitive or intransitive, and so this particular test might not work with that. So then we have another test that we can use. Can you put the word very before the participle? If you can, then it's an adjective because you can only put very before adjectives. So let's look at this. I'm relaxing. Can you say I'm very relaxing? No, that doesn't work in English. If you have an ear for that, you know that doesn't sound good. The music is very relaxing. Yes, that works fine. Then you know that this word is describing the music, and it is an adjective. See with this, the dog was very frightening the child does not work, but the dog was very frightening, period, does work. That shows the difference there. So if all of this seems like a lot of information, let me just say the most important thing is to remember that when you're talking about the affected person, the person who's feeling something, use the past participle. Don't say that you are interesting or that you are boring. Only if you are the source of it. If you are causing it to other people, okay, as a teacher, I can be an interesting teacher or a boring teacher. But when you want to talk about how you feel, and that's the most common use the past participle form to describe the person. That's the best thing that you can remember from this. Source is the ing. Past participle, the affected person. All right, try using this. Pay attention to the forms when you hear them. Good luck. Have an exciting time.